Issues and challenges of emerging literature. Objectives. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the issues and challenges of emerging literature, demonstrate an understanding of the ways on how these issues and challenges are formed, and develop a critical perspective on the role of these issues and challenges in the emerging of literature. So what is emerging literature? Emerging literature includes literary works published in this century. It grapples the modern themes like technology and global crisis. Emerging authors are capturing the story of the 21st century. It deals with current themes and issues around the world.
Okay, now let's proceed the issues of emerging literature. First is aesthetic movement. Aestheticism, or also known as the aesthetic movement, was an art movement in the late 19th century which valued the appearance of literature, music, and the arts over their function. And according to aestheticism, art should be produced to be beautiful rather than to teach a lesson, create a parallel, or perform another didactic purpose. A sentiment best illustrated by the slogan is art for art's sake. And the aesthetic movement maintained that art should not be confined to painting, sculpture, and architecture, but should be a part of everyday life. Aestheticism embraced not only the high arts but also ceramics, metalwork, fashion, furniture making, and interior design. Aesthetic writers. Aesthetic writers gave free rein to their imagination and fantasy. Their main purpose of their literary works was the pursuit of beauty. It dismissed the notion and art should have a moral or social purpose. The literary work of this movement are characterized by the immense use of symbols, sensuality, suggestion, rather than statement, and synthesis affects or corresponds between words, color, and music. Oscar Wilde novel The Picture of Dorian Gray is one of the most well-known example of aestheticism in the 19th century literature. And there were have the other writers that belong to aesthetic writers. First is Algernon Charles Swinburne no 1837 to 1909. John Addington Symonds 1840 to 1893. Vernon Lee to 1856 to 1935. Arthur Symonds 1865 to 1945. Ernest Dawson 1867 to 90s. And lastly is si Aubrey Bradley 1872 to 1898. The aesthetic project finally ended following scandal of the trial conviction and imprisonment of Oscar Wilde for the homosexual in 1895.
Thank you, Mabel. Now, let's proceed to feminism. Feminism or chick literature has been used to offend novels about contemporary life that happen to be written by a woman. So, another information, chick literature is a term used to describe a genre of literature that focuses on female protagonists and their emotional lives. It is often targeted at younger women and described as popular fiction. The term was coined in the 1990s and has since been used to describe novels about contemporary life that happen to be written by a woman. So another one, the term chick literature has been criticized for being sexist and demeaning to women. However, some authors have embraced the term and argue that it can be empowering for women if authors embrace the fourth wave of feminism. So next, it was pointed out that the feminism affects literature. In fact, in New York Times, the judges of UK Orange Prize for Women Novelists distress over the grim of brutal content offered the seer in the submitted manuscript. However, it is important to note that the feminism has also led to the emergence of new voices and perspectives in literature, which has enriched the literary landscape of the literature. Now, let's proceed to the usage of vernacular and colloquial words. So, in literature, using vernacular words confuses your readers if the language is unrecognizable. In the dialogue, the vernacular words like what and whatever is not necessary to grasp the discussion. So, now let's define what is vernacular. Vernacular refers to the informal spoken language of a particular region, culture, or group. When used in literature, it indicates that the author wrote the piece using their daily spoken language rather than formal language. Authors use vernacular in writing for three main reasons. First one, characterization, scene or setting, and relatability. When a character speaks in their everyday or informal language, it lets the reader infer a lot about of them, such as their age, background, educational level, and personality. Without the author having explicitly stated it, it also helps the character seems more authentic. To successfully place characters in a location or time period, it helps to use that location or time's vernacular. That will give the reader a better sense of what's happening around the character. If writing is too formal, the reader can feel distance from their work. Writing in a vernacular makes character relatable, and the reader feels more comfortable while engaging with the work. However, if the vernacular language is too unrecognizable to the reader, it can be confusing and detract from the reading experience. In dialogue, the use of like and whatever may not be necessary to grasp the discussion, but they can help the conversation sound more realistic. So, let us have here the material. So, let us evaluate how colloquialism is used. So, her girlfriend dumped him. So, what comes into our mind if we read this message? So, her girlfriend dumped him. So, it has a lot of meaning for everyone. So, for us, Gen Z, we have here the considering the colloquial way, dump means the boy's romantic partner ended the relationship, while in some you call that in the middle-aged woman, dump means to throw something in the garbage, so something like that. So in order to avoid that, we have here the next. So how should writers address this issue? To ensure that the reader can understand what is being written, authors must utilize vernacular and colloquial words appropriately and sometimes sparingly. So that's all for my part. So let me call the next reporter. Thank you.
Good day po. I am going to discuss about challenges in emerging literature. First, literature consumption is not the same as before because it was pointed out that the feminism affects literature. Pinapoint out daw po dito na ang isa sa consumption na hindi raw po same ang literature natin noon sa ngayon because feminism affects literature. In fact, in New York Times, the judge of the UK Orange Prize for Women Novelists distressed over the grim and brutal content offered this year in submitted manuscripts. So why did it become a challenge naman po? It became a main challenge to those modern writers because they realized that they have to add and make an extra things to get the interest of the people. So, may naging malaking hamon po ito sa literature because in the modern literature, napagtanto po nila na kailangan nila ng gumawa para madagdagan yung mga bagay na makakuha ng interest ng mga tao. As we all know po, sa panahon ngayon, hinahanap-hanap ng mga tao yung thrill o mga hindi inaasahang bagay o plot twist na po na tinatawag na para magbibigay saya sa kanilang binabasa o pati na rin po sa mga movies. Next po is too many writers. Today, everyone who has learned to quickly tap their fingers on the keyboard can easily think of themselves as a writer. Sa panahon daw po ngayon, kung sino man po yung natuto ng mabilisang pagpindot ng kanilang mga daliri o sa keyboard ay madali nilang maisip na sila ay isang writer. So, why did it become a challenge daw po? It became one of the challenge because technology has disrupted everything in such a way that there's no longer a strict rules to a writer or author when they enter into the library world. And some people do plagiarism and publish it in different sites to gain money, popularity, and more. Now, it doesn't really matter if you have talent or not in writing. Anyone can easily call themselves as a writer and point to a self-published book. Yes po, naging hamon po ito sa nagiging manunulat sa kasalukuyang panahon sapagkat sa teknolohiya po may disadvantage po and also may advantage naman po. Nagbago daw po ang lahat nang dumating po daw po yung point na walang matibay na rules or strict rules sa pagsusulat o sa mundo ng panitikan. Mailan naman daw po na gumagawa ng pambabastos sa akda or may iba naman po na ginagawa po itong pagkakitaan sa sa madaming paraan. Ngayon po ay hindi na gaanong mahalaga kung may talento ka o wala sa pagsusulat. Maaaring tawagin ng sino man ang kanilang sarili as writer or manunulat at magturo sa isang self-published na aklat.
So the next challenge is too much reuse and copies ideas, taking into account the amount of information that is produced and reproduced on the internet daily. Why did it become a challenge? It became one of the challenge because it is not really hard to come up with something new. Before, the author had a great scope for creativity and imagination, but today, one can argue that we've already covered everything and published books on all possible topics and genres. It is a challenge because they think that their works might be considered already been written, transcribed, adapted, and translated hundreds of times. So, when ideas are constantly copied in emerging literature, it hampers creativity and diversity of thought. This repetition limits new and innovative perspective, leading to a lack of fresh insights. Moreover, it can spread misinformation as unchecked content circulates without proper validation, making it challenging to distinguish credible information.
Some types of emergent literature are dismissed as inferior literature. Graphic novels in any form were generally dismissed as inferior literature or not proper reading. So why did it become a challenge? Basically, people say that the style of graphic novels, such as comic books or manga, cannot be counted as literature as they use more images or drawings to tell the story instead of written text.